Okay, here we go. Smack that record button. Okay, cool. So we got that. Um, cool. Yeah, what have you been up to, man? What's new? What's new in the?
Oh, just information backlog as always.
Yeah, and so you
Just a
mean
huge,
like
yeah.
trying to catch up on like videos and reading and all that kind of stuff?
No, kind of past that point. Just more of like things like that I want to do. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah,
But it's, yeah, just just everything. It's just because I mean, like Shield Wall has like a lot of cool like aesthetic stuff, but under the
right.
hood, it is just like it's the work is a startup. You know what I mean? It's like it's a one man show at the moment, so it's just a lot to do. Especially since I can looking forward like what's needed like so far ahead. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's very hard for like a single person to like accomplish that task. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I don't really know what else to do besides just trying to like grow more connections, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
I,
tough.
those are like two great topics to jump into, and I do want to come back to the idea of just like talking about how we organize things and how we. But that's the topic I had in mind before today, so we'll jump on that first, which is about like how to get things started. Like as an individual, if you're trying to grow an organization or collective, and how do you connect with other people or get people to be interested and stuff like that. It's a challenge. Like I saw,
Yeah,
we've been trying
yeah,
some of these exercises like in the show all like chat group, for some of the people that you've brought around and kind of like, hey, what level of interest or commitment or whatever can we try to start from some people? And of course,
yeah.
the handful of people you usually start out with, it's just you're never gonna expect too much. So it is a slow growth at the beginning.
Well, also too is like the reason why the aesthetics are so good is because I didn't have any other options. Like I had no money. Like I was just a homeless poet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like convincing people like just objectively like through like the art
All
was
right.
like the only option that I really had. You know what I mean? That's why I sort of like I sort of think like Shield Wall is really easy to sell to like higher agency people
Mm-hmm.
because they're more interested in like it objectively like through like other forms of capital.
Damn.
Whereas like lower agency people like because they're looking for support to get out of the rat race themselves.
Yeah.
They're looking for an established institution with cred, you know what I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
that can actually help them get out. Whereas the higher agency, they're looking for the gold nugget that people haven't found yet. They're looking for potential,
Yes.
you know what I mean,
Investors.
because they want
Yeah.
to get in early, you know what I mean.
Yeah. That's a
So
really
it's
good
so
point.
sort of
Yeah.
yeah, so sort of like the like the regular people like they want to get into the megacorps where they guarantee pay sort of,
Right.
whereas the VC types they want to get on the startups that are going to take off in the future and get those monopolies further down the line.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I just sort of find it's like yeah,
Well, that's the
it's
thing.
I
That's the
sort of
thing
feel like
about like investing in like startups is that they don't always work. So it is a risk, right? But
exactly
it's a
yeah yeah
high risk, high reward, higher. But that's one thing that really occurred to me is that like like people like us who are like more creative and have like a lot of like vision and ideology and are can be driven and motivated by that. But most people aren't. Like definitely most people want something more tangible, already established. And so yeah,
yeah
it makes it even harder. So at the very beginning, you definitely have to like you have to find other people who are willing to invest just based on who can kind of grasp that vision because there's nothing we're not paying you, we're not already like an established successful product, so it's like
exactly
you're gonna have
yeah
to rely on people who can really connect to the vision and say I see that this has potential, like either it has potential whether I get involved or not, or it has potential for me
yeah
to get involved and to help. So yeah.
and like even there like I don't really think that like even that is a really hard like there are some orgs that do that like some open source orgs that are like cool enough that they'll get a lot of like people just to volunteer for them.
Right.
But even with a shield wall, I don't even know if we'll be able to do that, which is why like I see the Adolans as the hyper sigils as shares. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Because
Right.
that sort of is the equity.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, because like I say, like if uh depending on how much resources you have, like a startup could start off differently. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
there are like thousands of options we could do, but once
Mm-hmm.
you realize that like the founder is a homeless poet, like that really limits the options to like three things.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's sort of like yeah, it's the options are there, but at the same time, if they're not, then it's basically just either we just use it as equity and we just keep building the network out that way,
Yeah.
or it's VC, or and there's basically only two options because
Yeah.
that's
So
basically it.
this man, there's so many interesting points here. So like one, talking about the idea of like tokens is like shares or whatever. That's something that's obviously really good. Like when you're trying to get people to invest up front, like it's really great if you can like have some kind of tangible, almost like a this is like a pre-IPO. This is like something that you're literally just
Yeah.
keeping track of it on your own, and this is like DeFi and crypto space is really good for that. And you may have seen I come across the metagame guys, and I've been spending more time with them and getting involved over there, and it seems to me that that's really like the right now, especially, or what they've been involved with, is mainly the technology and a lot of it revolving around like the crypto and so forth. But that's really useful. Like when I was in the NLI side, that was something I really wanted to work on. Was kind of like, hey, could we come up with some kind of like token that like that shows your demonstrated interest, that shows your investment and the cost that you've taken on, and then obviously once it
And
pays dividends.
yeah, and see like that's my weakness, right? Like I know how like because as a sci-fi writer, like I hang out with like the science types and the engineer types,
Right.
so I know how it all works. But on my end, like I'm already doing like a lot of daydreaming and high ideation,
Yeah.
like really a lot of forecasting, and my mind is taxed, and plus I'm like running everything from a manager level, and so the idea like someone says like like oh, you got to build like this NFT collection, or you got to build like this app and stuff like that. And I'm kind of looking at this like there are limits to what one person can do, especially a founder. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's just, and especially too, like as soon as I go away from like the high ideation and the art side of things,
Mm-hmm.
I'm outside, I'm a little outside of my zone of competence.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, yeah, like if I wanted to make like an Adolan NFT collection,
Mm-hmm.
like I could do that. But step one would be me going on Google and typing in how to do an NFT collection.
Right. It takes a little work for you to
You,
get involved with. Yeah.
yeah, and another thing too is sort of like there's so much like I'm fine with that being eventually, but at the same time the Adolans are more than that. Like it has to reach the metaphysical level first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because my sort of thing is like I always say like Shield Wall Inc. or Shield Wall Incorporated, like if it comes to that,
Mm-hmm.
because we should be able to like to really go down the novel path and the high honor path. Like we should be able to run Shield Wall purely on a metaphysical substrate or an aesthetic substrate
Mm-hmm.
or a cultural substrate,
Mm-hmm.
and like just use the ink side as a crutch. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, because that would give us a huge edge over globalists. You know what I mean? Um, because we will never be able to beat them money wise, right? So the more we can run on a metaphysical substrate, the more adaptive we'll be able to be.
Man, I love that. I
Um,
love that idea. Like you called it metaphysical substrate. Like, and to me, what I'm thinking about is like for a lot of human history, before like currency really took off and civilization really took off, it was all about might. It was all about the physical currency, like that. It was just arms
right.
and just violence. And then we kind of and that even carried out all the way until like the banking revolution in like the 1500s. And then it was like, okay, money is now like really what it's about. Like it's about this like financial shift. And so what,
Yeah.
what I'm seeing here is a potential like the next shift, which is like a shift into the aesthetic, into the metaphysical, into the cultural, the religious, the um man, yeah, just like
And
the next thing, yeah.
even like yeah, and when you go down to like the legacy side, um um like once you have a bunch of money, like you're interested in things that money can't buy. You
Mm,
know what I mean? They rise
right,
in value.
right.
So like obviously like most VC types, like I picture like what's like I what's that I always picture like that Kevin O'Leary guy from Shark Tank,
Hmm.
like as like the average or something. Like they're not going to be interested in any of this stuff. It's just money to them. You know what
Right,
I mean?
right.
But there is a certain subset of VC who like understands first principles and he can see like the full spectrum of capital and he just cares about his society. You know
Right.
what I mean? Who would be
Yes.
interested in things that money can't buy?
Yes.
So
Yes.
like it's sort of like a King Arthur archetype, you know what
Hmm.
I mean, or like a House Atreides type thing, which is like what like which would be great for because then we could build Shield Wall as like fully invested from the beginning,
Hmm.
and not have to grind so much. You know what I mean? But the other option is just equity with all the Adolans. We can just build out that way as a network naturally.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
I wrote some notes about that because like that's a conversation like that all organizations ultimately have, and we talked about like with the institute, it's kind of like I definitely focus more on that side where you're just kind of organically growing, kind of getting people involved, and then like some of the other things will kind of come out of there. You'll get donors and stuff, and then eventually you'll get higher level donors. Um, but yeah, I think that's definitely you have to do a little bit of that first. It's very rare that you're just going to be able to jump in and get like
True.
a
Yeah.
VC, especially like you said, since we're operating in a like a more of a cultural capacity,
Yeah.
and not like there's not like a super tangible like product or service that we're selling. It's more like hey, we're building like a almost like the equivalent of a like a religious community or something. And but
Well, I mean, Shield ultimately is an info militia. Like that's how I see it. So
in
we are an
info
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 militia.
militia, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, like on the one hand, it's sort of like we don't have a product. On the other hand, any VC who's playing the game would want an info militia on his side, especially one that's loyal to him beyond money.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So we do like have like an abstract value. I know it's hard to see, like a lot of people don't, you know what I mean? Like
right.
at that level, but definitely at like anything below that, like that's just like the 1% level, you know. But you're right, the 99% other stuff that's just grinding basically and just getting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Like the idea of an info militia, because this idea that we are in an info war or a psychological war has
Exactly.
become
Yeah.
very very well understood by people. So that's the natural emergence is that you would need that, and yeah, that's really good. And it's
And I
interesting to
mean,
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say, and also too, just like um, uh, bringing like sort of like I mean, obviously like Shield has like um, the some a lot of hippie vibes from the hacker subculture,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it was inevitable that a faction of the Brahmin caste would be militarized as
Hmm.
an aesthetic.
Right.
You know what I mean? So on the one hand, it's just a natural progression of professionalism into a sci-fi future or cyberpunk future.
Well, see, that's the thing I'm thinking about though. Is that like like I like from the for okay, so for example, like I see things like the institute as being more of like a militia because they're a lot more engaged. Well, even them, they become a lot less militant. I do know some people that are adjacent to the institute who I consider to be more like they're like engaged in like that kind of almost what you would call more of like warfare. Whereas, and again,
Well,
the
I mean,
institute's
like,
more in that direction. But yeah,
well,
myself.
there
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, like on a mimetic level, like as an info militia, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, because it's basically like once you get up to like fish and warfare, it's just it's all at a mimetic level because everything's downstream of that. So eventually, because what you had the Brahmin cast before was very laissez-faire. It's
Yeah.
every Brahmin just kind of like feel good. It's either, very hippie or very square or
Hmm.
something like that. Well, now as we're going into more of a mimetic pressure cooker, you know what I mean? Like a mimetic evolution pressure cooker, I guess you could
Hmm.
say. The Brahmins are being forced to cluster together in infomilitias, basically. Is
Right.
basically sort of one of my predictions, right? So that's sort of what I'm referring to. Is that it was only a matter of time before like these lone Brahmin types would
Hmm.
have to.
Unite.
I mean,
Yeah.
especially after first principles,
Yeah.
I mean, where there's not so many excuses
Hmm.
to just be in deconstruction mode
Yes.
24/7,
Yes.
365 days. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, so now it's like the critic or critique capital is kind of waning a little bit. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes.
And so, in order to actually start building, the Brahmins have to start working together. So
Yes.
that's what I
Yes.
mean. Like, it was only a matter of time before some Brahmin faction became a little more, like, adopted more of a professional aesthetic. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
Because I say a militant just because professionals already been claimed by the business class, and they operate on money. That's
Hmm.
why I say like we're more of a like a that's why I prefer the term info militia
Hmm.
even more than network state because it's a different mindset. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? I want to build shield walls because they have um, they're here to resist the Titans too, right? So they have like they have a metaphysical mandate in a sense too that they have to live up to. So they're always at war with on an info level. And that's all that I meant, sort of.
So it's interesting because I almost like the idea of network state, and for that same reason that you're identifying that, like, the culture of critique is kind of losing its value, whereas the culture of creation is kind of like the demand for that is increasing, and so we're finding ourselves in that. And when I think about militia, I think about like critiquing or you're fighting the enemy, versus the idea of a network state is like we're kind of building our own thing in parallel. Like we're not even worried about the enemy, because there's plenty of other people out there that are kind of like constantly focused on the enemy, but I feel like that's really what's new and what's needed is kind of like let's just demonstrate how we could do it and design how we could do it better. Um, but
Um,
every state needs a militia, so you're doing a little bit of everything at the same time.
yeah, I sort of see it more of like most egregores have an infomilitia, but Shield Wall is an infomilitia with an egregore.
Okay, okay.
Kind of. Um,
So, sorry, go ahead.
I I I I think I like that the infomilitia mindset better. Just because I just sort of feel like the business cast has already claimed like this the more of the square professional thing, you know what I mean? Where
Mm,
it's sort of more, because I sort of see like a network state when I look at network states, especially ones I'm see online, I really wonder like why can't I just swap this out with a corporation? You
okay.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas in information, if you have that metaphysical and more tighter aesthetic,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually something there that's almost a little more intangible that a regular business doesn't have.
Hmm.
Is sort of my take on it.
So one thing this is making me think of, and it's kind of a conversation we've had before, which is like trying to understand how Shieldwall might fit into a larger kind of like federated effort of people who are, whatever you want to call it, like the meta movement or anything like that. And I know before you had described it as almost kind of like we're almost like a lone faction, sort of like not totally alone, but like you're kind of like you're almost like semi-independent, like something like that. But the idea of a militia or like a true shill wall or a vanguard is kind of like, well, you're just like the Navy SEALs of whatever this bigger, you know, faction is, right? Does that
Yeah.
so? So does that which direction do you feel more? Do you feel like it's more of like almost an independent, autonomous kind of thing, or is it kind of like the front line for a bigger entity? Maybe a little bit of both.
I would say front line,
Okay.
personally.
Okay.
I say the reason why I say like semi-lone faction is just because just because like I said I created to go after the globalists. You know what I mean? I wanted to beat them on their own field.
Okay.
And also just like as a result, like it has as a network state always has a slightly different mindset than a nation state.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like at the end of the day, like it's just it's like a business that was like uh like semi-allied or something. You know what I mean? Like obviously they work and try to help out, but they also have to like balance their bottom line. You know what I mean? They have like clients, you know what I mean, customers, maybe they not be able to say some things. They have some sacred cows that they, just they can't sacrifice,
Uh
you know
huh.
what I mean? They have like certain constraints, you know what I mean?
So
Um,
I'm trying to think. So let's say that, like, okay, if Shilwall and where you find you would like to be is kind of seen as like the vanguard or the front line of this, whatever, this parallel, decentralized kind of like neo network state, so to speak. Would you like to see yourself in this organization as like? Would you like to be like a commander, almost like the equivalent of like a military commander of psychological or information operations? Is that kind of a role that you would like to, or whereabouts, you know, like if we
yeah,
does that make sense?
yeah. So like there's two things I'm fighting for. Like I see myself as fighting like simultaneously for like science and magic
Mm-hmm.
and like philosophy is the battlefield.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like on the one hand, like I'm trying to work in all the first principle stuff into Shield Wall.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, like it's impossible not to be a vanguard of that. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
in the work.
Right.
And at the same time, as a creator cast, I want to support like the team romanticism as a philosophy and the paganism and the magic side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I see myself as a vanguard of both. And as far as like how I see myself, um, like uh, like as the info general, like if um, like if I had a bunch of funding, you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, yeah, I would take that role, and I think I would do really, really good at it. You know what I mean? Like, because I have all the vision, but I just don't have any money or employees or any resources to execute it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
If I did, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't spend all day trying to explain things to like, like all the like people on Twitter and like
Mhm.
everywhere. You know what I mean? Um, like I could just operate, like if I could just give orders to people, like that would be awesome. But I'm just a homeless poet, so no
Yeah.
one takes orders from
Yeah,
me.
I
You know
really
what I
like
mean?
that because I've heard you say that before, and that kind of puts it into context that you may be able to function most heavily. Going back to the tri-functional, that you really relate to
Yeah.
the state militia's kind of sector and law. I mean, I know you've been writing the Constitution and stuff, so like I see a lot of that. But with that said, I mean, obviously, like people like us are like the very like ground zero like starters of this movement. So it tracks that if something like this were to come in fruition, that people like us would be able to take like very high positions, which would naturally kind of operate across domains. You'd be able to like
Hmm.
also have this like visionary like poet side as well, which is totally that's like the Greco-Roman ideal. You had these polymaths, you
Hmm.
had people who excelled in all all realms. So that's yeah, that's very good.
Yeah. And also like, yeah. Um, yeah, I just, yeah, like just as like a sci-fi community, you know what I mean? Like I can see like, um, it's just a byproduct of hanging out with them. You know what I mean? You're always in the future. Your head's always in the future. You know what I mean? Always looking ahead at what things could be. And um, the real game changer is that like most people like in the regular business world, like they grow up studying real companies.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas a sci-fi writer grows up studying futuristic sci-fi companies.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That have extreme novelty or technology of some sort,
Hmm.
and so it kind of gives us a different perspective on how things are going to go. And yeah.
Well, that's one of the. I was gonna say that's another. Like before you talked about like magic and then like the science and then kind of the philosophy is the battleground, and I was thinking about how you were kind of at both ends of that spectrum and I'm kind of in the middle, so that's a good way that we relate together. And that's another
Yeah.
way too. um, well,
Let,
I just blanked so hard. What was the last point you had?
oh, is it sci-fi writers thinking of the future or
Um
always?
Fuck. That's whatever. We'll come back to it.
Well, I was gonna say anyway. It's just that uh, like as a sci-fi, writer, well, like what I mean by like the team enlightenment versus team romanticism
Mhm.
thing is like eventually like the last culture war is going to be fictional preference,
Mhm.
right? Because we're going to be at the point where we're imposing our own fantasies onto the world.
Right.
And so like because the team romanticism versus team enlightenment philosophy battle has been going on so long, I sort of see them as the two candidates to kind of last and make it to the end game, sort of like that.
Mhm.
Um, so like I sort of see like I'm looking forward to a time where like fictionalism, like where magic can be real, in a sense, and it already sort of um, yeah,
So
I don't know,
I
it's
wanted to. I remember what my point was, which was that you talked about how like a lot of people grow up like seeing how companies work, whereas like a lot of sci-fi writers are able to think about how they would work, and that's another kind of like gap or kind of a specialization that I'm able to help with is like I've worked in the corporate world and I've come to understand it
yeah.
really well, and so. There's a little bit of both. Like we understand how it is now, we understand how it could potentially be better, and so that's a big part of it. But I wanted to also like so back to this it was team romanticism versus what was the other team.
Well, it's just a team enlightenment versus team romanticism, and it's just it's a philosophical preference basically
Mm-hmm.
that it keeps it appears in fiction in works of fiction, like it's a fictional fault line.
Right.
You know what I mean? In the literary community, like if you write a book, like they'll look at it and they'll read it, and
Mm-hmm.
based on like the themes, the aesthetics, the style, the presentation, etc., and the writer, you'll either be lumped in one of those two categories, either
Okay.
on team enlightenment side or team romanticism.
So
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
but since like the last culture war, like since it's going to end up as like a battle over fictional preference,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually going to be a form of formation instinct, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually going to be pretty serious. I believe that this is going to be one of the final fault lines for what like
Yes.
where a lot of the culture war is going to end up.
So So give me a very high level, like very short description of or summary of each one of team romanticism versus team alignment. Like, what are the core? Like, I kind of
Yeah,
get an
the
idea, but yeah, tell me.
the core divider that's usually used is like Star Trek would be like Team Enlightenment, and Star Wars would be Team Romanticism. Um, it,
Okay.
it's I don't want to go too in because like if you go to like TV tropes like and like actually look at it like this is like thesis, you know what I mean? Like it gets pretty deep and like um terms have changed over the years and stuff like that. But basically one's just like yeah,
So let me
it's
try something
I don't
here.
want
So let me try something like literally just based on the words themselves. I'm thinking about team enlightenment. You know, when I think about people seeking enlightenment, like, one of the first things I think about with enlightenment, as I've read about it and as I've pursued it and as I've kind of really gotten there, is that I think a lot of what enlightenment boils down to is like a point in time or a mental state that we project and we assume exists. You know, we say, I'm here, and there must be some kind of nirvana enlightenment state out there. And we have so many assumptions and projections about what that actually is. And oftentimes, whenever we do actually get to some place that feels final, that feels like, oh, I've kind of made it, it's, very rarely what we thought it was. And of course, this could be, I'm sure we could come up with tons of different stories and examples. Like one that comes to mind is Paul Coelho's The Alchemist novel, where he basically, travels across this long journey and get to the treasure, and the treasure kind of like points back to where he started. Basically, it's this
to.
idea that you had it
Yeah.
all, you had it all along, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So that's what I think about enlightenment, and the way that well, here, let's do this. So then I think about romanticism. And when I think about romanticism, I think about just you're not projecting some goal that's over there that you need to get to. Romanticism is kind of just about appreciating what's all around you and the beauty in life all around you, and that you're kind of already there. And so the connection between the two is that the romanticism is almost like a state of enlightenment, because rather than like
Hmm.
seeking like, oh, I don't have it, what am I missing, there's something out there, you're kind of like, oh, enlightenment is here and now and all around me, and like the world is beautiful, and so that's so it's almost like a
Yeah.
progression, you know so anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's how I
Yeah,
see
well,
it.
that's a well, it's a very that's the operational way of looking at it.
Hmm.
But like what I'm the way I'm looking at it is the fictional side.
Right.
Like for me, like Team Enlightenment versus Team Romanticism, that's literally like show me a photo of like the world or like the world building or like
Hmm.
the concept art for like a
Hmm.
story,
Hmm.
and I can tell you in like 5 seconds which team he's on.
Well, I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
they tie together, because ultimately, what is fiction, and why do we do fiction? Because
Mm,
fiction
true, true.
is like another universe in this whole other thing, but ultimately, it is us here in this universe that create that, and there is some purpose and there is some tie-in. Whether it's like
Yeah.
the development of our psyche, and or character development, or whatever, and so the juxtaposition that I just created is within that frame. Like, yes, these two, like, you'll see, like, for example, you'll see characters in fiction who pursue enlightenment. You'll see people in
Right.
reality who pursue enlightenment. You will see characters in fiction who, or you will see the work of fiction in its in entirety that is romantic, and then you'll see people in real life living through a romantic lens in seeing. So it's like it's a parallel. So it exists in both.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. Like I sort of like maybe like the best way I could sort of describe the way it's looked at in like the literary community, or like actually not even the literary community, but just how like I personally look at it,
Mm-hmm.
like my own personal take on it,
Mm-hmm.
is you have like the spectrum from like fictional or like magic, or we'll just say fictional,
Mm-hmm.
or we'll say magic to science. We'll
Okay.
say the spectrum of magic to science.
Right.
Um, well, like so once you have the science and you got the first principles and you start adding the fictional side or the magic into whatever you created with those first principles. Well, now what happens is everything between those two endpoints, the two axes, like the between that, is philosophy.
Okay.
And so what
Right.
happens, like the way I sort of see it is like um, Team Enlightenment and Team Romanticism. These are political parties that are like picking up philosophies that are in between that spectrum as like in their coalition.
Okay.
So like these two sides are sort of like gobbling up the spectrum, just like you would in a democratic process, where it would merge eventually into two parties
Mm.
that will gobble up each 50% of the spectrum.
Okay.
and sort of that's what I'm sort of seeing
Okay.
is these are going to be two like sort of mindsets that are going to try and that will succeed in gobbling up at least 50% of the spectrum, and then they'll be competing for fictional um, for to can impose their fictional fantasy or formation instinct on this is a future thing, you know. I mean, it's not
Right.
going to happen soon.
Well, so
We still got several culture wars to get here, but
so my big question is then would you across the spectrum of magic to science, or would you associate Team Enlightenment with science and then Team Romanticism with magic? Is that kind of roughly the case?
no, I sort of see like they have like yeah, I guess so. I guess you could say that.
Roughly,
But
roughly.
they
Yeah.
but yeah, but they pick it's kind of just like how regular political parties
Hmm.
have really strange coalitions.
Right. And
It's
sometimes
the
sometimes it
same.
flips, or sometimes they take ground from each other and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
it's a little weird, but yeah, I don't mind that, that I wouldn't be surprised that generally like was an undercurrent or whatever.
Right, like that's kind
But
of the
yeah,
general direction they're coming from. But of course, political parties fight for that middle ground, which is like the philosophy world
yeah,
where things coalesce from both sides. And so this actually goes back to a point which I wrote down earlier, which is that because you talked about how a lot of the guys like in our circles and so forth are very very much this like scientific culture of critique, whatever hyper masculine, hyper empirical, and then some of the guys
mhm,
like us, we're able to kind of represent a little bit more of the magical end, but we're not totally set. We're still connected and understanding the full spectrum, and we're able to kind of integrate it in a way that I feel like a lot
exactly.
like, and we can find people on either side of the spectrum who are not really able to integrate with the other, and this is just a very common
Yeah,
problem, and I think so. When our big solution is to be able to kind of like create a diplomacy, a compromise, a contract, a marriage,
yeah.
a union, you know, yes, like that, pretty much something like that, like somewhere in the middle.
See, like, yeah, and see, like, I sort of have like you can always count on me to have like a different mindset, like a
Sure.
different take. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Just because of my like unique thing, like the way I look at it, like I don't really see it as like unifying. I
Mm.
sort of see it as a phase that I got past, like a trial.
Okay.
Like we're past the first principle trial. You know what I mean? Or
Mm.
like we're getting there. We're still falsifying. You know what I mean? So once every organization starts to do that, the value of the magic and the fictionalism is only going to increase because they're essentially aesthetic substrates that people are going to operate under, or philosophical substrates, I guess, are the many different ways you could describe them. But this is where the real competition is going to come down to eventually,
Um.
because
Hmm. Well, I was just gonna say, so and I want to clarify just in case it's not clear. Like when I say a union or a marriage, I don't necessarily mean that like you've lost track of the separation or you've lost track of the spectrum and the differences. Like I don't want to just collapse it all together and forget about the differences. Like just for
no, no,
example,
no, yeah, yeah,
right, when a man and a woman marry, like they represent those individual ends, but they also find common ground, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here. I feel like yeah, I just wanted to make that piece
yeah,
that
for
way.
sure, for sure. But I mean, even so, like I just see it as a process. You know what I mean? Like I sort of see like first print, like the knowledge of first principles as like a filter.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like a mimetic filter that you gotta get by. And what happens when you get past it is just like the environment changes. Like we're moving from one environment to the next.
Well,
Is sort of how I see it.
so one thing like I do like that idea, and I think that fits in really well. This idea that like you there is a almost like a progression or stages in there. But I think one thing we can potentially agree on is that the goal is to kind of be able to reconcile the whole spectrum. You don't need to represent the whole spectrum. Like if you're a magical thinker, that's fine. You don't have to be like a scientist. You just need to at least be able to kind of understand what you do, understand what they do, and understand how it kind of relates. And rather than being like,
Yeah.
right. And so, and same goes for scientists. And so this progression is really just really about getting to that goal, understanding the spectrum, like having a little bit of ability to understand at least what's happening on the logical, the scientific side, and then same on the other. And that was a big point I wanted to make too, is obviously that people don't start in the same place. So it's not a very like clear cut, here's the progression. It's more of like, okay, you're starting here, here's the full thing, travel on this journey.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like Avatar: Last Airbender, where the avatar may start as one element, but ultimately they have to go through the different elements, but it's just going to be in a different order based on
Yeah.
something like that, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's uh Yeah, I mean it's yeah, I mean it's I mean with the stuff we're dealing with, like it's it's huge questions. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you and me, like we're like cutting edge of like some of this future stuff.
Yeah,
You know
man,
what
we
I
gotta
mean?
we gotta we gotta keep that perspective. Like we gotta keep hyping ourselves up. Like we're fucking
I
we're
know,
like
yeah.
insanely intelligent. Like we're insanely tapped into this shit. Like it's a balance. Like you always got to stay humble to an extent, but you also need to make
Yeah,
sure
it's
you're not like
tough.
you're not too humble. Like we need to like definitely. And this is just the beauty of connecting with others and having an organization is like you can kind of not get down to yourself about and help build yourself up and keep yourself built
Yeah,
up. That like holy shit, like wow,
yeah, I
we're doing
know. Yeah,
so
like
like that first conversation we had where we were just like nailing through those bullet points of like what the problems were with the dissonant right and
I
like
know. Yeah,
that's fire. um
man, Neutron, like the last like 3 videos, 4 videos, like this one included, like we've touched on some crazy stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Like
man,
a
yeah, it's a
lot.
banger, and I'm really enjoying it too because like I mean, there's just like there's no one else out there. There's like really that we know of that's like really tapping into this kind of stuff. Like
Uh,
we're seeing
honestly,
pieces here and there, and we're trying to connect the dots. But like, yeah, we're we're
I
killing it.
can't tell you, man. Oh man, like I just like I really struggle to like um associate with other groups.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Well,
it's so hard just because like they're all missing something. You know what I
yes.
mean? And yeah, I don't know. It's
So that's something I've been thinking about a lot. That's a point I had written down. It ties back to what we're sitting here talking about. Is that everybody's got this different starting point or this different piece, and we're trying to get everyone to be able to reconcile the full spectrum so that we can cooperate and federate together in a more productive way. And that's something I think I'm positioned very well to do. Like, and that's my like skill set is being able to do that. And so a big part of that, and this kind of even ties back to the conversation about like Shillwall, for example, and where you and Shillwall kind of like could fit into this larger thing. Because when we go to these other organizations and they're like picking up on a piece of it, and then how do we like show them a visual that's like, okay, here's how the pieces fit together. Like here's the technology stack we're working with, or here's the federative like whatever decentralized power structure or something like that. And here's
yeah.
how so yeah, we're basically
Like I think eventually, yeah, like because like we can sell our stuff like
yeah,
on merits to like the high agency types,
yes.
but eventually, like you were saying, like as Impel generals, we're just gonna have to be able to do things. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah, and that's
um,
the thing you have to accept too is that a lot of the people, most of them, don't want to have this full perspective and or can't or don't need to have this
yeah,
full perspective, and so that we have to kind of be okay with that. But and this is the biggest, this always the biggest thing is like anytime you get in a situation like that where you're looking at society, you're looking at individuals, and you look at people and they're like they are don't want or can't do a certain level of thing, that is fine. That's how society is meant to be. You have a hierarchy. The
exactly,
core thing is just to get the competent people in the right place, and that's the biggest thing.
exactly,
That's the biggest thing.
yeah,
If you've got incompetent people that are too high up, or competent people who are outcast or too far down, that's a problem. So
yeah,
this idea of a true meritocracy, an efficient meritocracy, will always be in our mind. And yeah, man,
mhm,
we
yeah,
are pretty much at the top. We're very close. So.
nice,
And this is the funny thing too, this is how I developed as a leader. Is that anybody? It's how do you say like no one like almost like develops as a leader because they want to. It's usually out of necessity because no one else could. No one
yeah,
else could because there's a vacuum, and that's how it was for me.
exactly,
As I was going through my journey, if I could have found an organization that was already there and like leadership and stuff, I'm like, oh fuck yeah, like I'll jump in and
yeah,
be a foot soldier, but that's not there. So it's like we have almost the
exactly,
responsibility to be the leaders, and it
yeah.
comes with some work and responsibility, but it also comes with some reward and a status as well. So
Yeah, it's funny because I usually end up playing that role in other groups because like I join or whatever, and I just see that it's like it's just too much or like they wouldn't understand or whatever. So then I just turn into like the grunt for their I just kind of go through their boot camp and have a little fun with it or whatever.
yeah, and that's the funny thing too is like you kind of do have to. I mean, even in our society in general, like I still had to just go get a job with a company and just be like basically like a grunt because our infrastructure isn't set up to properly place people yet or properly leverage what people can do. So yeah, and even on some of the organizations like the institute and some of the things that are adjacent to us, you kind of have to go in there. You can't expect them to just like rearrange their whole infrastructure and their whole hierarchy and their whole leadership.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
oh my God, you're a good leader here. You're right to the top. It's like, so you kind of go in there and you understand in your mind,
Yeah,
like, oh my God, like, they're only a small piece. They're only seeing a small piece, but you still kind of have to play the game, and that's okay.
yeah,
And you can support them and stuff, but I think with enough time and work and just I think a lot of it is just nature is at our side. Like
yeah,
nature hierarchies naturally emerge, and are naturally sorted. So all we have to do is kind of like keep in line with that natural flow, and I think uh,
yeah.
it'll sort itself out basically.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big problem with like the whole like a huge portion of the Brahmin cast in general is that they just don't want to help other people. Either you know what I mean, they don't want to help other commons because they're so
You said a you said a
deconstructionist.
huge
You know what I
portion,
mean?
a huge problem with who? Just like the
I
main.
just like the Brahmin cast in general. You know what
Oh
I mean?
yes.
Because they're always deconstructing.
Mm.
Whereas I always see it like even though I can see like flaws in a group, I still join. And if like yeah, it'd be nice if like I could be treated as like a herald of another egregore and be given diplomatic immunity or something. Or,
You
but you know,
can,
if
but
they just
only to yourself right now, only to yourself and to me, right? But
exactly.
we'll get there. You say
But I mean, yeah, but I don't mind just like serving as like a grunt in their groups. You know what I mean? Like I don't mind. Like it was just going back to the shield test that I did in Shield Wall a few weeks ago. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like the reason why things like that, simple things like that, are so hard is because people are so hyper individualized. You know what I
Yes,
mean? And
yes,
a lot of the Brahmins and their deconstruction are a big problem with that. You know what I mean? Um, when
yeah.
really it's not that hard. Like
Well,
you go into another group and just like help them out. Like what's the
yeah.
problem?
Yeah, exactly. It really is like so simple. You kind of said like the Brahmin class is deconstructionist. Like, is that just like the current state you see ourselves in, or do you think there's some inherent like deconstructionism to the Brahmin class? Because to me, I think
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I am
Well, no,
okay.
I was just gonna say like because in my mind, like like the Brahmin class isn't inherently deconstructionist. It's just that like that's the current situation we find ourselves in, because in a lot of ways that's kind of stage one about like
True.
that's stage one of a
Exactly.
new development is you kind of have to mutate or
Yeah.
separate yourself, and then you say, okay, here's the problem. So you're deconstructing, you're taking it apart, and then you're understanding
Yeah.
how can it be better, and then you're actually putting it back together. So
Yeah.
we're kind of teetering, we're transitioning from like we've taken it apart, we understand what the pieces are and the problems, and we're now building those visions of how to put it back together, and we're doing it. So
Yeah. I'm always like anytime I see a Brahmin doing anything or building anything, I always support him, like no matter what or how bad he's doing, or even if he's a little cringe or whatever, just because like such a huge portion are just critics.
yes,
Every creator is precious.
yes, absolutely. Like you see so much of that. Anytime like people like, I mean, in so many ways, like the culture of critique is almost like a disease if you let it. I mean, and it happens for so many people. They never create anything of their own. They're afraid to be judged, but yet they'll be the one to judge others and yeah, just basically deconstruction. It can be very toxic, and it's very sad to see. But that's what we can do to help. We can support people, and
Yep.
we can stand up and do whatever the fuck we want to do in spite of all the haters. And that's a huge. I mean, to me, you hear the word based all the time. Like that to me is the fundamental definition of being based. Is you have a solid foundation. You are based on that foundation, and you are not significantly impacted by the
Yeah.
haters. Like you're just like, I
Yeah.
know this is right. I know what I'm doing. I've got my lane. Stay the fuck out of the way. I don't care what you have to say.
Yeah.
Like and it's again like many things. It's a balance. Like sometimes you do need to listen to the feedback. Sometimes it is valuable. But many
Yeah.
times it's just people just talking shit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah, man, we're I don't know. I think we're both doing pretty good. I know we both got backlogs of stuff to do and stuff, but Natural Order seems to be doing really good. Shieldwell's doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Drew's going well.
Yeah. Yep, it's taken at a good natural pace, and it's just like at this stage, it's a lot of it's just based on our individual energy and ability to kind of do things, and that's fine. These things like
Yeah.
start to snowball and take a life of their own over time. But one thing I wanted to come back to is again because I'm trying to architect out how these efforts and organizations fit together, and so we talked about how Shieldwall is kind of is an info militia. So it is almost like if you're using the tri-functional as a basis, it kind of is like it's kind of in the well, it's kind of in the cultural realm and the political realm heavily. It's kind of a little bit of both. Um, so that's what.
And well, in the yeah, in the metaphysical realm too. That's why like it's I was important. Like I didn't really want to build. I didn't want to choose one
Right.
and like do the 1, 2, 3 thing. I wanted to build them all up incrementally at the same time. Is
Yeah,
the
yeah, and
goal.
that's how I'm seeing it too. Is attack on all fronts. And one thing I'll say is that if we're just using the trifunctional model, which just has the state, market, and culture, I would say the metaphysical kind of fits in the cultural as well because like that's where the religion is, like
Hmm.
that's where so it's kind of that's where some of the cultural piece comes from, I think. And then
Yep.
so yeah,
Um. Yeah, and there's always like the thing with like the importance of like the metaphysics and the religion is just um like especially too like just like with the whole like post first principles filter
yeah,
is like there is that intangible quality that like the ascet like I guess you describe it as like the ascetic or like I just prefer magic is just the way I look at it
right,
that like the demiurge that calls people to power, you know what I mean?
yes,
Or the will to romanticism is what I prefer to call it.
fuck yeah, I love it.
Um
That's like a
yeah,
that's like a
so it's sort
deity.
of
That's like powerful. That's like a like if we
yeah.
had a pantheon of 12 or less gods, like that would be one of them. You know.
Yeah, and another thing too is like I don't know, like even with like even with like the muses, you know what I mean? Like it is sort of um like they are like drafting creators in a sense. You know what I mean? Is what how it feels sometimes. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are like sort of magical moments, you know what I mean? And on one end, but on the other end, you know what I mean? They are sort of um um like like drafting the creator cast into the culture war in a sense. You know what I mean? So it's not even in a sense that you can even see the muses as like being part of like the info militia or the info war in a sense. You know what I mean? And that sort of just ties into Shield Wall being an info militia in the same way on each end of the trifunctionalism.
Yeah, and see that's the as much as I like the trifunctional and use the trifunctional, I still get a little bit of an itch that something's missing or something could be like it could be restructured a little bit or or maybe a different model altogether. And usually what the kicker is a lot of times is like science and technology. Those are because like those don't fit perfectly. Like I would say science might be able to kind of like live in the cultural area, but it is very pervasive, and technology also very pervasive. And I think that's how most people will say it, which is fine. But it just I don't know. Yeah, it's just something I think about, like whether the geometry is a little off. Do we need to go to a quad instead of a triangle? Like how do we map out these entities? It's not a huge deal, but it's just something to think about.
It's yeah, and it appears on like the thing too is um this appears on each side of the political spectrum. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll have like the hippies, like one side with like with their spirit journeys, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And on the other hand, you'll have like the Baptites with like their will of power and they're like these demiurges and stuff like that that call them to do these things. And so it's sort of like I sort of see it as like it really is like a cross spectrum thing that is very intangible. You know what I mean? And I just want to. It's I don't know how to account for it. You know what I mean? It's just that it's something that I felt myself, and I just know it's out there. You know what I mean?
So
Like
yeah, like yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, I just like for me like you were saying about leadership being a vacuum.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like in a sense, it's almost like uh it almost feels like a cultural like on my end like as a poet it almost feels like a cultural draft in some sense,
Mm,
you know what I mean, sort of feels um like w- like like there's a calling, you know what I mean,
yes.
um so it's like
Yes.
how do you I don't know how to account for that, you know what I
Yes.
mean,
I love that.
like
Well,
there were times like where I had like really like when things like really like the roughest things was when I had like all these ideas for Shield Wall and Hyper Sigils and the Jones. Like, I had it all in my head, but I hadn't written anything down yet,
right.
and that was so I couldn't show anything. Like that was like a brutal, tough time for me. And like there were times where I just like I felt like why was like a homeless poet chosen to like do all this shit?
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like
yes.
struggle with this. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
why is this my like you saw like in the group chat like. I was living in the woods. You know what I mean? Like there were some times when I was like writing the poem like just like get the hunger pains away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like there were times where it's like, why keep going? But I kept going, and so like, and there was no money in that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so like, it's like, where does this calling come from? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's I don't know, it's the extra thing.
Well, I
I
love
don't know how
that.
to account for it, but
The way I would say is it I still feel like that fits in the cultural realm because it is very much like a very spiritual and religious thing, like to feel like a calling from a higher power that you're still trying to understand.
yeah,
And that's the best way that I would see it, describe it, account for it, is like you just said a minute ago, is like this idea of like a muse or almost like a deity that is just like, I mean, it's a
yeah,
very very powerful thing. Like, um, it reminds me of a few different ideas I've heard about how things work in society, and like whenever things are out of balance, like, there's like these forces that seem to like uh, call for great minds and great individuals to kind of step up and help remedy the situation, or create the next thing. And yeah, I very much feel like we're a part of that, and I think it'd be really cool
for sure,
to.
man.
I think it'd be very cool to keep developing this like archetypical pantheon, and that we can kind of reference to, like, hey, this is, this energy is very much coming from the whatever, the creator goddess or the muse goddess or something like that. Um,
Well, and
because
you can throw Apollo in there too. Like I included him in the Constitution as well because they're all the 10 of them are kind of connected. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Just historically. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's I mean, another thing too is just like uh, yeah, it's yeah,
yeah. The Greco-Roman model is great. I mean, their pantheon is very well known and stuff. Like, I've always connected with like, I guess in the Greek it would be is it Hermes? No, Mercury. Mercury is Roman. Hermes is Greek, I believe. So it'd be Hermes, which is
yeah,
like more of the magic god, and the messenger, and that kind of spirit. Uh,
mm,
and so that's a big one. But yeah, just in general, using the pantheon to understand the archetypes, and mapping that onto, just doing a very like a cross cultural pagan study. Like, look at the Norse gods, look at the Hindu gods, like where the similar
yeah,
archetypes emerge, and that's kind of a big thing of what I want to try to do, is like just create like an interface, or like an API or something like that, so to speak, like a spiritual
yeah.
API
That'd be
where
awesome.
where these gods and archetypes map onto each other, and man, it's just it's a beautiful idea that like we could revive, because this thing has been lost. Like, the Abrahamic thing has
Yeah,
crushed all of it, and
yeah,
but yet this like global paganism is so much more deeply rooted. It's so much more
mm,
aligned with truth and nature, and it's so much more powerful. It's funny. Like, my wife and I she's very much into reading and whatnot, and we thought about a story. We were kind of pitching an idea for a story where these gods kind of like resurface, where they come back, and that's very much what we're a part of, honestly.
yeah,
It's
yeah. It's
fucking awesome.
incredible. Yeah,
It's fucking
and I
awesome.
mean,
I love it.
and another thing too is like, especially um, like we can extend this new metaphysical defense
Yes.
like around Christianity, and we can help them protect their cons because they're really vulnerable to
Mm.
deconstruction in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, so like we can, and like yeah, it's
Yeah, that's my goal. Is like, and one thing I want to go back to too is just like the importance of the masculine, the male and female. Which, if you go back to the trifunctional, the masculine is like the law, is the state and the law. The feminine is like the culture and the church, and then the market is considered ascended, I guess. But
yeah,
this is the thing. Like, we oppose Abrahamic kind of thing in a very masculine way, and a lot of things we just want to fucking destroy it. But we also have to keep that balance and like that compassion. Ultimately, we want to help. We want to help the people.
yeah,
We want to destroy the demons that have
exactly.
or the
It's
malware that has infected their operating system. But we want to take care of the
yeah,
people and help them.
and another thing too is like they beat us,
Yeah.
they beat us with NLI talks a lot about how valuable Christian is as like a forgiveness religion because it allows reciprocity, right?
Right.
Like
And
this
redemption.
this aspect of slave morality is how they destroyed us originally. You know what I mean?
Right.
In the ancient days. So like obviously because it's our foundational substrate, we have to incorporate the master morality in there, right? Obviously,
Yes. Yes.
but we also have to reconcile it. Like you tweeted about this a little while ago
Yes.
about reconciling a master and slave morality. Like
Yes.
no more dichotomies. Like we this is the spectrum that we have to unify
Yes.
together as under one roof. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I don't want us to make that mistake again. But at the same time, we still got to recognize um, the will to romanticism that fuels our side as well.
Yeah, and that's such a core theme for me is balance and being cautious
Yeah,
of over binary polarizations and that's because that's just a tendency. That's a tendency of all humans or any intelligent machine is to like break it down into the simplest terms like black and white, zero and
yeah,
one. But we've got to develop more sophistication, more subtlety, more spectrumatic thinking, third circuit thinking as I call it. So yeah, that is a continuous yeah continuous theme there.
yeah, yeah. A lot going on right now. Really seems like just like the human hive mind in general is just hopping with tons of I mean, there's just lots going on
Yeah,
every
man.
day. Like,
It's so exciting. Like for a lot
yeah,
of people, the chaos is like, oh my god, there's so much happening, I can't keep up with it. But for a lot of us, like we're just like chaos magicians. It's just like fuck yeah, like I can, I thrive in this. Like that's where creativity happens, right? So it's exciting, and I think we're well positioned in within that.
me too. Yeah,
And so yeah, that's just again what the tangible next steps and actions is just obviously stay in touch, keep networking
oh
along
yeah,
our lines. Like I said, I've met a group of people on Facebook that are really kind of picking up on these like sci-fi kind of forward-thinking protopian parallel ideas. The metagame
cool.
guys are all pretty good. I've gotten some. They seem like I said, right now they're very much versed in the technology, but they seem interested in kind of plugging into a larger vision, cultural, political effort. And so I think
Same with Shieldwell. Yep.
exactly. And so I think one of my or our collective task is to try to architect or try to map out this kind of like structure like for this parallel
Yeah.
and I love they have this idea of DAOs or DAO,
Mm.
decentralized autonomous organizations, and that's something I
Yeah.
really want to play with a lot because, uh, it's like the hierarchies are efficient. A lot of it is just because of the network type nodal structure that they take on.
Exactly.
But you
Yeah.
don't have to. It doesn't have to be a top down. It can just be like a central node that helps
Yeah.
connect other nodes. And so I'm really excited about
Yeah.
that. Man, it's just so cool. Like everybody has a piece to play. I feel something
Yeah.
very strong emerging. You call it the egregore, like many egregores or one big egregore is certainly emerging, and man, it's such a great thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Just egregores within egregores within
Oh yeah, and
egregores.
speaking of that,
Yeah.
I was gonna say going back to the trifunctional, and we're talking about like I'm feeling like you said, you don't quite know how to like model that or account for that, and I'm kind of like looking at the trifunctional, saying I think something's like off or could be improved, and like that's one thing I've thought about too is how it starts out as a simple triangle, but like one thing that you realize, for example, is like every spoke on that triangle is reflected in the other spokes. So it starts to take on this like
Yeah.
it's almost like it starts to create like a more complex geometry, like a diamond or something, where it's just like
Exactly.
whoa,
Yeah.
it's like triangles within triangles and reflecting each other, and like the culture reflects the politics, which reflects the culture, which reflects the market, and so.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a diamond might be like a multifaceted diamond might be a good complex
Yeah.
geometry and. We can't expect the
Yeah.
commoners to understand that, nor I can hardly expect myself to comprehend. So maybe some AI can help us out.
That's a good image. Yeah, it's good descriptive image.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing with like shield wall is like I'm very conscious of like well, one is since the hypersigils are basically like my idea is to tie them to 1% of the share, right? So right there we're limited to the Dunbar number, and so I'm just conscious of the fact that is why like I take such a very ambassador diplomatic mindset. Is that I'm just very conscious of the fact that I got to work within a bigger federation. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah. So
because I mean, like obviously, like each hypersigil will have their own fandom, and like maybe like Shield will have its own fandom as well. So I mean, that adds in hierarchy stratification. But I still see it as like the Dunbar number. You know what I mean? As
yes,
a hypersigil network as a locos. So I'm just conscious of the fact that we're just we're a small org that has to fit into bigger organization.
for now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, or
Till we
yeah,
become
or
a
well, I guess no. I mean,
billion dollar
yeah, yeah. That's
megacorp.
that's the goal. I mean, it's always going to be like a federated kind of thing, a network. One thing I was going to talk, I was just thinking about, It's part of what you were saying was triggering a lot of ideas in my head, and what we just talked about how like you start with a trifunctional, but like each spoke starts to reflect each other. And I was thinking about how shield wall, as we started, I kind of said like, oh, it's a little bit of the state, but it's like a little bit of the culture operation. And so I thought about it. It very much is that kind of like reflection, whether you're looking at the state reflected in the culture. So, or like the idea that like, okay, for example, like a Brahmin or a priest class, which kind of undergoes a type of like info militia in the cultural realm, or you can think of it like in our modern society, you can think about it like a psychological operative existing within like a military. So that's like a cultural op, that's like a culture op inside of the state op. So it's like one of those examples of like this one inside of that one, and vice versa. So it's kind of positioned that way. Yeah, I'm gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna try to build this like federative map, and it's just gonna be this like four-dimensional
look
fucking
awesome.
diamond. It's like what the fuck, But it's funny. Like I just see like I saw when I got on the meta game, when I got on their repository to start like getting involved in their code and stuff, like their tech stack is like fucking insane. It looks like that. It's just like this like
nice.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's that's kind of what we're building. We kind of are, especially with AI and being a programmer, it's like we kind of are building like a system, an operating system, a cultural operating system or something like that. And so yeah, we're just kind of architecting it out, and it's fucking cool.
I mean, like me, like looking forward, like in my future vision, like the Adolans or just Shield Wall members in particular, like they would be synced with an app, you know what I mean, which would have the Muses AI, which they could be integrated with. They would have VR, so that would show things relevant to us. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh man, so many
We'd be
possibilities.
operating in the metaverse, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah,
awesome.
like
Full
this is
spectrum.
like
Can't
again,
wait.
this is why I love working and talking with you, because like the future looking perspective is so necessary. It's so fun. It's so relevant. It's just
Yeah,
like
I love it.
we can't, so many people, especially this is another huge problem like we've already talked about many times of like the dissident right and the larger conservative movement is like they're picking up on some of the problems, but their solution is kind of like let's just go back. Let's just like totally. And it's like
Yeah,
okay, you want to be Amish? Like what are you trying to do? Like that's not really going to work. Like we got to be forward thinking. We got to be forward thinking. And so
yeah,
yeah, I love it.
yeah. Me too.
Hell yeah, this has been a banger, dude.
Yeah,
Let's
I
see.
agree, man. This has been a pretty good talk. We've covered a lot of topics.
Yeah, as always, it's a banger. We're at about an hour, I guess. This might be a good place to take a break and just chew on it because
Beautiful.
we both been running at like 300 APM, 300 cycles per minute, megahertz.
Yeah, living at the edge, the
Yeah, man.
cultural edge.
Fuck yeah, I'm excited. But we'll definitely try to keep this weekly cadence, weekly touch base type thing up, and I'll just we'll keep each
Yeah, I
other
love it.
updated and keep manifesting this network state. And that's gonna be my challenge for myself is to kind of architect it out, map it out a little bit, as well as continue to network and do everything at once. But yeah, man, good stuff.
Hell yeah.
Cool. Alrighty, yeah, we'll leave it there for now. I guess this has been a pretty good one. I'll probably try to upload it just to my channel like I've done the others,
Sure.
and whatnot. And we'll either way, we'll talk to you soon, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna be reposting this one on Twitter. It's a banger. I want my little fandom to watch it too.
Fuck yeah, man, same. And we'll start pulling more people. I mean, we both already have like contacts that are, And this is the funny thing too
Yeah.
is like this layer where we're talking about like organizations and what they're called and what their purpose is and stuff is almost like just like a mapping, almost like an artificial mapping on top of it. Like underneath it all,
Yep.
at the end of the day, is just a network of individuals. And these
Exactly.
egregores
Yep.
are kind of forming on their own anyway. So we're just trying to like put a sticker on it or like here's what it's called and here's what it looks like. But it's all happening naturally, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of.
I mean, culture. At a certain point, you can just look at cultural equations objectively, and some are just better than other. And when you have a really good one, like you should, put it out there.
Yeah, man, and that's it. And we can pick that up, and we know we're a part of that, and that's the best
Yep.
place to be. Hell yeah.
Love it.
Cool, man. All right, we'll leave it there. Let's see. I'll go ahead and probably smack that stop record here.